from, and thank you for joining the latest Let's Talk Talent webinar, today focusing on resilience in uncertain times. I'm Craig, I'm the Global Sales and Operations Director here at Let's Talk Talent, and I'm going to be your compere for today's session. And before we begin, we would like this session to be as interactive as possible. So please introduce yourself using the chat function. If you've not utilised Demio before, in the chat function is at the bottom. Click on there. Please introduce who you are and where you're calling in from today. It'd be really great to see where and who you are across this. But one thing we want to make sure is it is an interactive session. So please use that chat function. Ask lots of questions throughout the session, and we will get to as many as we possibly can throughout the session today. I also want to acknowledge that the context in which we're coming together. So for many of you joining across, especially the UAE or the GCC region, this is not a normal moment. There is uncertainty, there's disruption, and for some, it can be a really real concern for stability of what actually comes next as well. And in times like these, conversations about resilience can sometimes feel a bit distant or even a bit difficult, because resilience isn't about simply pushing through or pretending things are okay. It's about how we respond to things when they're not okay. So today's not about quick fixes or easy answers. It's about creating a space to pause, to reflect, and to explore what really means to stay grounded, focused, and human in the face of uncertainty. And we're incredibly fortunate to be joined today by our UAE Country Director, Mark, who brings not just expertise in this area, but lived experience of navigating challenges with resilient mindset. So if there's one intention that we can set together right at the start, it's this: hopefully by the end of the time together we have today, you leave with something small but meaningful, whether that's a shift in perspective, a practical tool, or just simply a sense that you're not navigating this alone. So thank you all for joining. Thank you. Please keep it going on the chat. It's lovely to see you all coming along today, and nice to see some old faces. David, it's great to see you coming back. I'd love to see you and speak to you. So for those of you who haven't heard of Let's Talk Talent before, we are a global consultancy that helps organizations get, keep, and grow brilliant people. That's by creating clarity, capability, and cultures where people and performances thrive. What most of us will know is the power of resilience. And hopefully you're joining today because you already know that. But taking a deeper look into the data, it tells us something quite powerful, a little bit further outside the box. And resilience isn't just a nice to have in challenging times, it's a defining advantage. So the organizations that invest in building resilience don't just weather uncertainty, they navigate it with greater clarity, make stronger decisions under pressure, and ultimately come out stronger on the other side. But what's important, and especially relevant right now, is that resilience doesn't sit just at the organizational level. It lives and breathes through people, through how individuals think, how they respond, and how they show up, especially how they feel uncertain, or when things feel uncertain or out of their control. So these statistics tell us a story, and they talk about organizations, but today is all about you, your mindset, your capacity, and the small things you can do to make a meaningful difference, both to you, but also to those around you as well. So on our journey today, we're going to explore the world of resilience. We're going to look at why it's essential, how do you build that in yourself, so self-resilience, how you can support others with some practical tools and techniques to help you navigate uncertainty. But enough from me. Without further ado, I would love to pass over to Mark, who is going to lead us through this journey today. Mark.
Thank you ever so much, Craig. And obviously, it's great to have you on the call. Obviously, we've got the afternoon time here now in the UAE, and it's great to see, as you said quite rightly, so many people on the call from the UAE, from Europe as well, which is fantastic to see. So welcome, to everybody. My name is Mark Colbourne, MBE. I'm the actual UAE country director for LTT, or as we know, Let's Talk Talent. So what I'd like to do is just to dive in, because obviously we're conscious of time here today, and we really appreciate everybody, jumping on this wonderful live webinar. So why resilience is essential? Well, in today's tech-driven, fast-moving world and global uncertainty, we need to be resilient for change. And as Craig said, quite rightly, I've been through traumatic change, in my life and in my career. And I feel quite proud and privileged, to share my experience and my knowledge, certainly from my life in corporate and as an executive coach. And I guess resilience, let's take a deep dive into it, because it creates not just operational pressures, within the working environment, but also mental and emotional strain. Now, resilience, as far as I'm concerned, is a critical capability, certainly in today's tech environment, as was mentioned earlier on. And it certainly allows individuals to stay focused, control what they can, and respond effectively. So those who build resilience don't just manage change, they use it to grow and perform at a higher level. And I guess having been, through that journey, to London 2012 as an Olympian, I say this quite openly now. If it was not for people like Professor Steve Peters, who educated us as athletes, we would have never have achieved what we did, So let's have a look and let's move on. Very good. So as you can see on the screen, okay, what does constant change actually mean to us as human beings in the working environment? Because constant change requires continuous adaptation. Now, I'll share this with you. As human beings, we don't like change. However, we're perfectly built for change as logical thinking primates. So in today's environment, change, as we know, is relentless. Success comes from the ability to adjust quickly, stay flexible, and remain open to new ways of thinking and, of course, working. So what about performance? Well, performance is expected under ongoing pressure because we all live in this always on culture now, don't we? And I guess high expectations don't pause for challenges. And certainly those professionals on this call are required to deliver consistently, even when pressure, okay, even when pressure is not our friend, okay? And we have to make ourselves composed, and we need to focus on those essential skills. So what about decisions? Well, decisions must be made despite uncertainty. And obviously we've had, incredible uncertainty here in the UAE over the last 5 or 6 weeks. Now, let's have a think about clarity. Clarity is not always available because, there's things going on around us that sometimes we don't get to know what is going on. So we're always living in uncertainty. So let's think about strong performers. They need to learn to make informed decisions with incomplete information, trusting their process and judgment. So what about resilience? Resilience drives consistent and, sustainable results. Resilience enables people to stay steady over time. It supports recovery, maintains energy, and ensures performance is not a one-off, but something that can be repeated consistently, which is really important, really important. So let's move on. So think about leaders. If you're a leader on this call or you're part of an organization, how are leaders and organizations navigating uncertainty in the UAE right now? Well, leaders and organizations in the UAE are navigating uncertainty with a strong focus on adaptability. So what does that mean? Well, it means growing awareness of the human side of performance in a region that is fast moving, globally connected, because the leaders understand that constant change can create pressure, fatigue, and uncertainty for their people. As a result, many are placing greater emphasis on clear communication, psychological safety, and creating environments where individuals feel supported, they feel heard, and able to perform without fear. At the same time, organizations are continuing to invest in digital transformation, strategic partnerships, and long-term growth, but with a more balanced approach. There's certainly a shift from purely driving results to sustaining performance, recognizing that resilience comes from both strong systems and, of course, strong people. Now, leaders are learning to combine decisiveness with empathy, ensuring that while the business moves forward, their teams remain engaged, energized, and confident in navigating whatever comes next.
And Mark, just to add to those insights, I think some of the core themes that we're seeing with some of the clients that we're talking to in and around the region, there's sort of three trends that are coming through. So one is the clarity, and focus on clarity at the moment. So people are looking for that connection. There's a stronger focus on people and well-being, which is a really great thing to be doing, and actually focusing on making sure that people are checking in regularly, they're providing flexibility. But thirdly as well is not forgetting about performance. And we'll come back to that later, but that performance focus and readjusting it, and pushing for, rather than pushing for business as usual, pushing for more realistic focuses when it really matters is fundamental, and making sure it shifts. But what we say is actually, please do keep the questions coming. That was just an early question that we had that we wanted to put in early, just to say there's some key elements that we wanted to address. But we will, if we don't come back to some of the questions, we will be sharing some of the insights across our broadcast channel. So please, if you are interested to hear more about our the questions, the insights, the events that we have coming up, please add Mark directly, and he will have you opting into that broadcast list. So use that QR code to add him now. No major rush, because if you do miss this one, there will be one coming later on as we go through.
And just to reiterate, Craig, it's a broadcast list, not a WhatsApp group.
Absolutely, yes. So there isn't going to be two ways back and forth, but we have got something else to look at the end as well, if you do prefer a bit more of a discussion group in itself. But what we wanted to do is take a very quick early pulse check to get a sense of where everyone is today. So we're going to launch a quick poll. Thank you, Lydia, for being behind the scenes and actioning that for us. And I'd like to get a sense of where you are on the resilience scale. Now, we've put 1 to 5. 1 is being low. So 1 is being I'm struggling at the moment. 3 would be I'm managing, but it's up and down. 5 is I feel strong, grounded, and able to cope. So please just go with your instincts. It's just a quick pulse of where you are feeling at the moment. And we'll give a couple more minutes just so people could come through. But Mark, you're in the region at the moment. Where would you place yourself on that scale right now?
I would have to say a 3.5.
A 3.5. It's a shame
3.5.
3.5s. Otherwise, we'd have a very big scale on this poll. I think.
No, I'd probably say no. I'd have to say a 4.
Okay.
3 wouldn't be doing me justice, if I'm honest. And I think what I've definitely identified is using that empathy and perspective, is making sure that I'm checking in on those people in my network. You know, even though I don't manage a team here, I have that network of friends, colleagues, you know, around me that I know. I certainly know the benefit of checking in on them, you know, certainly on a daily basis. And those people that have been traveling, then checking in on them, you know, certainly on a weekly basis, because, you know, some of the network that I've got, you know, they've traveled to various parts of the globe. So, you know, you're always going to get that time zone difference. But it's ensuring that I'm checking in on them just to make sure that they're okay.
Yeah,
you know,
it's that focus on the well-being piece. It's a really great thing to do, and it does have humongous impact with people. But thank you so much for sharing your comments. It's powerful to see actually quite a bit of a spread. So no one's a 1, so that's fairly positive to see. But I'm sure there will be some people in your network that may even be a 1. So for those who are towards the lower end, what you're feeling is completely valid. In times like these, it's natural for resilience to feel stretched. And there'll be lots of people who have their resilience stretched as well. So we want to make sure that we give you some of that space and support today to help you rebuild that moving forward. So hopefully when we come through next, some of those tips and tricks we can put into practice straight away. Those in the middle, the people who are managing but fluctuating, it's something many people experience. Resilience isn't static. It moves depending on what's happening around us, but also how we're feeling on that day. I know personally from my resilience, it can change day to day depending on a number of factors. How well you slept, what's going on inside, outside. So it's really important to check in with people regularly to see how they are and help see where you can help stabilize and strengthen it where possible. And those who are feeling right at the top now, it's incredibly valuable, not just for you, but for those around you. Resilience is contagious. So how you show up can really support others too, which is, again, the reason why people look to leadership in times of uncertainty as well. So thank you so much for sharing that and being so open and honest. But yes, I'm going to hand back over to Mark, who's going to take us through some of those learnings.
Excellent. Thank you, Craig. So resilience, as it says on the screen, is the ability to adapt quickly when under pressure and think logically when conditions are uncertain. And I guess, we've been through this certainly in our lifetime, from the financial crash through to, trauma around the globe to COVID, and obviously the issues that we've had here, certainly in the Middle East, over the last few weeks. So what does it really mean? Just quickly. Well, for you, it means staying calm, clear, and in control when things don't go to plan. It's about thinking logically, making good decisions, and continuing to perform, even when the pressure is high and the outcome sometimes can actually be uncertain. And this is obviously really important, in business, certainly for the leaders on the call, because those teams and those people, are looking up to you. And I guess they almost expect you to be that calm, collective, captain of the ship. So let's move on. Here we go.
Mark,
excuse me. So
just before we jump into that, we have got a question. So I just want to
fab.
So the question is, what are organizations finding most challenging when switching quickly from BAU, as we knew it, to the BAU now? And what emotional intelligence capabilities do leaders need to lean into to help their teams continue performing well?
Well, I think that's certainly something we're going to come on to, in a few slides' time. It's dealing with almost the uncontrollable emotions that go on, within, the human being. Because, with technology, I guess we have full control. I know obviously AI is, it's obviously on everybody's lips right now. But I think in terms of managing, any part of the globe through any form of change, it's how we take the emotional part and make it logical. And it's tough, it's difficult, it really is. And that's certainly something we're going to come on to in a slide or two's time.
One thing I would say, so if we take it into two forms, what organizations are finding most challenging at the moment that I've seen is the pace of change. It needs to be responsive quickly, and we saw this in other situations. I'm not going to mention the dreaded COVID word because we can't go back there. But the rate of change and the pace of change is a challenge. The decisions that need to be made quickly and priority shifting does create more instability, but also loss of control. So there's those factors that people are dealing with, and the tensions between maintaining performance but acknowledging that people are not operating in normal circumstances. So I know some of the conversations we've been having, some organizations have gone to working from home, but some organizations can't do that and they have to be working in the office. But it's just understanding, okay, what's the impact of that and people coming into their normal place of work when everyone else is at home, and also the mental challenges of that. And I think some of the so when we look at the leaders and the capabilities that they need to be showing, especially around emotional intelligence, is self-awareness. So it's recognizing that their own responses to pressure may be changing. I also see empathy is really key and fundamental to managing this uncertainty, because as we mentioned before, the well-being, the checking in, understanding different situations. Some people will have their children at home, which will be causing more stress and pressure. Aside that, but also adaptability, I think, is key. So flexibility, being flexible with their leadership style, and being able to regulate their emotions. People look towards them as leaders, so being able to regulate their emotions effectively, stay grounded, stay calm and intentional in what they do, which is even more of a challenge if you are stressed yourself, and it needs to be dialing that resilience button. You don't dial a button up, do you? But you know what I mean. Pushing that resilience button to make sure that you regulate the emotions effectively. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it's very true that the whole world right now is not as normal as we would want it to be, because as human beings, we love certainty and security. That's what gives us our calm state. And sometimes, when we have that apprehension and the fear and the doubt, and certainly the uncertainty, it really throws us into that fight, flight, or freeze, part of our brain,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So awareness. So I think this is the part of the webinar where we take a real deep dive into us as human beings. This incredible machine, this $1 trillion machine that we get given for free. We love learning how to operate AI, and we love to operate our laptops, our phones, our cars. But I think many people, they forget how to operate, this machine, because, it can certainly take control, certainly in these times that we find, in the Middle East. So to use the reference for Professor Steve Peters, in our heads, there are two of us. And I was privileged to work with Professor Steve Peters for 3 years as part of the Olympic world-class cycling program. And I genuinely shrugged my shoulders when I heard this quote. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how important it is in any high-performing team, high-performing environment, and certainly when change is always over the horizon. So let's take a deep dive into the chimp paradox, as Professor Steve Peters calls it. So it was developed, by this world-class, renowned sports psychologist who explains how the mind works through 3 key parts. We have the center part of our brain, which is known as the limbic system, otherwise known as the chimp. We have the human, which is the frontal cortex, and then the computer, which is the parietal. Now, the computer it does what we ask it to do. Okay, so it's through that repetition, of creating those habits. However, we have a problem. And the problem is the chimp, because it represents your emotional, impulsive thinking as it reacts quickly, often driven by fear or instinct. However, the human is your rational, logical mind that makes calm, reasoned decisions. It probably was the mind and the thoughts that, decided to wear what you're wearing today. However, the computer stores our habits, beliefs, and automatic responses that we build over time. So the key idea is that you cannot eliminate the chimp because it's 5 times stronger than the human, but you can learn to manage it. So those high performers, they recognize when emotions are taking over, and they use tools to pause, think logically, and respond effectively rather than react impulsively. And I would imagine that there's plenty of people on this call that have been through maybe road rage in their lifetime, and that reaction is not the human, because that's the chimp. So let's move on. So in terms of How to build self-awareness under pressure. Well, self-awareness starts with noticing your thoughts, emotions, and reactions in real time. Under pressure, many people operate on autopilot, which is the computer. But high performers pause and observe what's happening internally. By recognizing your triggers and patterns, you create space to respond with control rather than react emotionally, which, as we just saw, is the chimp. So number 2, identify and strengthen your inner voice. Now, we all have this inner voice, whether you like it or not, because in fact, it was probably with you before you were born, but that's another webinar. Your inner voice can either support you or hold you back. Think about this. Building awareness of how you speak to yourself is key. Now, Professor Peters, true story, told us on the Olympic team to name your inner voice. True story, because you're having those conversations with yourself almost every day. Strengthening it by shifting from criticism to constructive guidance, focusing on facts, preparation, and what you can do next to move forward with confidence. So what about create consistent mindset, habits, and routines? This is critical in any changing environment, as Craig quite rightly said. So let's think about resilience just for one moment. It's built through daily habits, not occasional effort. Those simple routines such as reflection, goal setting, and recovery help stabilize your mindset. When your habits are consistent, your performance becomes predictable, even in uncertain environments. So number 4, reframe any challenges as positive opportunities. Challenges are inevitable, but how you interpret them really matters. So instead of seeing setbacks as failures, view them as feedback and a chance to learn. This shift in perspective builds confidence, encourages your growth, and allows you to move forward with purpose rather than hesitation. So what's the point of this slide? This point of this slide, it's all about take your time. You don't have to literally react, okay? You have time, reflect, breathe, make those logical decisions, okay? It's really important.
And Mark, before we move on, Yvette has said that she calls her inner voice Jessica. I do feel sorry for anyone that you know called Jessica Yvette, if that's your inner voice. But Mark, you can't say that you name your inner voice and don't tell us what yours was called. What was yours called?
Okay, well, I'm going to say, first of all, my daughter's name is Jessica, so I can relate to that. And for those people from Europe, and certainly the expats living in the UAE, my inner voice, my chimp's name is Dave. Now, if anybody remembers Only Fools and Horses, and they remember the character Rodney, whose name was Dave, but that's another conversation. That's my inner voice, you know, lovable character, trustworthy, cheeky chappy. That's my inner voice.
Well,
But great question. I could ask you the same, couldn't I?
Well, I haven't named my inner voice because this is news to me, so I have actually taken it down. So I will try and name that inner voice because, yeah, unfortunately, it probably comes out
Very good.
too much. But thank you, appreciate it.
Excellent, very good. So let's move on. So this is just a very quick slide to ask yourself this question: are you in control? Okay. Now, Professor Steve Peters, every athlete that's gone through the Olympic and Paralympic program gets asked this question. And the question is, when you're in change, this is really important. When you're going through a process of change, to ask yourself, am I in control or is my chimp in control? Ask yourself the question, do I want? Okay, do I want this to happen or not? Because normally if it's an emotional reaction, it's the chimp that's in control, not the human. So I'll leave you with that thought. So here we go. So how leaders can support resilience across their teams? Well, this is such a big subject right now, across the world in different countries and certainly here in the UAE, as we said, which is the reason for us, obviously, having this supportive webinar, for all of our friends and network across the UAE. So resilient teams are not built by removing pressure, but by leaders who create trust and strength. And this is so important because think about this. Leaders support resilience not by shielding their teams from pressure, but by creating environments built on trust, clarity, and this is so important, consistency. When people feel safe to speak up, challenge ideas, and certainly learn from mistakes, they grow stronger under pressure. Resilient teams are shaped by leaders who model composure, communicate clearly, and give their people the confidence to perform, even in uncertain situations. And we'll take a deeper dive now, into, the real reasons behind resilience. So let's look at creating psychological safety with accountability. And this is so important because people in today's environment, Craig, I hope you would, maybe give me your opinion and your thoughts on this, because people feel like they're walking on eggshells. It just, as you said earlier on, that the speed of change is happening around the world so fast now. It's scary. It really is. So let's look at how we create psychological safety, with accountability in the workplace. Well, strong teams need both safety and standards. This is important. Leaders should encourage open dialogue, honest feedback, and challenge while still holding people accountable for performance. When individuals feel safe to speak up and clear on their expectations, trust and results grow together. So what about model resilience through calm team behavior? Well, teams take their cue from their leaders. When leaders remain calm, composed, and solution focused under pressure, it sets the tone for everyone else. Consistent behavior builds confidence and helps teams stay focused rather than reactive. And that's so important, as you said, with the speed of change. So communicate with clarity, purpose, and priority. In uncertain times, confusion creates stress, as we all know. Leaders must simply share the message and simplify it around what matters most, what comes next, and why it's so important. This is transparency 101. Clear communication reduces noise and helps teams stay aligned and productive. And obviously, going back to, the Olympic experience I had, transparency was everything. It really, really was. It was a case of, well, be you, just be the best you. So what about support energy with well-being? And this is critical, not just output. Sustainable performance comes from managing your energy, not just driving the results. So those leaders who prioritize well-being, recovery, and balance enable their teams to stay engaged, focused, and effective over the long term, because we have to focus on the process, not the outcome, which is so important. So we've probably all heard this before. Teamwork makes the dream work. Well, what does that really mean? Certainly in the world of sport, which, was obviously my life, on the Olympic program, for that 3-year period. So let's look at resilience and how somebody like the New Zealand All Blacks use this as almost their ace up their sleeve, because, resilience at its core is built on discipline, humility, and commitment. 3 qualities that define sustained high performance. Discipline is about doing the right thing consistently, especially when it's difficult. Humility keeps individuals grounded, open to learning, and focused on the team. And this is so important for those leaders on the call. Commitment ensures that standards are upheld every day, not just when it matters the most. So for those people on the call that may not necessarily know too much about the New Zealand All Blacks, they're a powerful example of this in action. Their culture is not built on talent alone, but on daily behaviors that reinforce discipline and shared responsibility. Every single player is expected to prepare, perform, and contribute to something bigger than themselves. Humility is deeply embedded in their values, famously reflected in the idea of sweeping the sheds. No one is bigger than the team, regardless of status or success. This mindset creates an environment where continuous improvement is expected, and ego never overrides collective purpose. Commitment ties it all together. The All Blacks don't chase short-term wins. They commit to a legacy of excellence. Their resilience comes from holding themselves accountable to high standards every single day, ensuring that performance is consistent, sustainable, and always aligned with the values of that jersey.
Mark, I've just got a question I'd love to ask. Actually, it's coming off the back of one of the questions that I think Prakash actually asked on the chat. But there's a lot of talk around having a fluid safety net, of promoting a performance, a lot of focus on well-being, supporting people. But do you have any tips? And I'm happy to give you a little while to think about this. But any tips that allows leaders to get that balance right? Because sometimes if they're getting pressure from the powers above, the board, stakeholder, whatever it may be, how do leaders make sure that they support their team, but also still drive high performance in times of uncertainty? What tips do you have for that? Anything we can learn from Howells?
Well, I think the most important thing is get to know your staff. It's so important. We all look the same. We all tend to act the same as human beings. We tend to put on this face, but at the same time is really get to know, your staff, because I guess different people in different situations, will, going back to fight or flight, some people will freeze, some people will run, but as a team, think of the All Blacks. As a team, they all stand for each other. And as I said earlier on, we don't like change as human beings, okay? But we're perfectly built for change because we're logical thinking primates. So using those tools and those techniques to stop, breathe, fuel in this machine with the oxygen we need, it gives us that time, okay? It really energizes us to think and make those decisions, which is so important because, as emotional beings, it's so easy to react because you don't think you have time, but actually you have lots of time,
Yeah, and it's a great point, and I think Lisbeth also mentioned that, and it's be close to your people, not just in terms of physical presence, which I thought was a really lovely one to do. And I think also coming back to that, I think it's not a trade-off between performance and well-being. I think they both support each other. So actually looking after your people, being close to them, being clear on expectations, making sure that actually support is intentional, not just reactive, is really, really important. Just to make sure that you are one step ahead of the game and things are there for people when they need them, rather than reacting once it is an issue. But one thing I also really like is one thing that I've always been, and I can learn it from the All Blacks, is leading with humanity and transparency and giving things a go, but also being part of that. So the analogy of sweeping the sheds, as a leader jumping in and seeing whether things do succeed or not, trying new things, being happy to turn your hands up and say, that didn't work, but at least we gave it a go. I think is
well, that's a great quote. There's a great quote from Michael Jordan, the basketball player. It's okay to fail because everybody fails at something, but what's not okay is not trying.
Absolutely.
Which is so important. So important. But yeah, great point, actually.
Great.
So practical tools and techniques to help navigate uncertainty. And this is obviously, we're really getting into the crux of it now, aren't we?
We are.
So the tools to create clarity, control, and confidence when facing uncertainty on a daily basis. So I guess in uncertain environments, the right tools help bring structure to the unknown, going back to the All Blacks, as you said. Rather than waiting for clarity, high performers create it by focusing on what they can control, breaking challenges into manageable steps, and staying anchored to the clear priorities. And there's a great quote that was used by Professor Peters, in the Olympic team, to control the controllables. And it really shortens it and makes it, perfect. So I guess this shifts the mindset from overwhelm to action orientated. Tools also build confidence. When you have a simple process to follow, you reduce emotional noise and think more logically under pressure. You don't need perfect answers, you need a clear next step. Consistent use of these techniques helps you to stay composed, make better decisions, and move forward with purpose. And just a few sort of tools really, going back to what Craig said, okay, is to focus only on what you can influence. Don't ignore what you can't, but just put it at the back of your mind, Certainly identify the single most important next step, okay? Breathe, we we need to breathe. It's so important, okay? Slow down your thinking because you're in control of that, of that thought process. Even though the chimp is going to be there with you, he's not in control if you don't allow him to. And limit focus to 3 key actions at any time. So at least you feel then in control. And certainly reflect and reset. This is so important. Review what worked, adjust, and certainly move forward. So why do we feel the way we do? Well, if anybody knows anything about the Colbourne change curve on this call, it's so important to understand that feeling the way we do through change is normal. The sweaty palms, the sweaty brow, the palpitations. We can't stop those feelings, but what we can do is manage them, which is so important. So I urge you to go and Google the Colbourne change curve because it's so obvious. When you feel those feelings of denial, shock, anger every time we go through change, but you can manage them. So I suppose we'd love to invite you back in a few weeks' time, maybe, Craig, to go through the Colbourne change curve in much more of a deeper dive.
We could do a whole
So
hour
you
on that, if you like.
Oh my gosh, I've got a workshop as half a day on it. Honestly, it really is. Anyway, so let's move on. So in terms of focus and control, only what you can control. This is so important because in uncertain situations, energy is often wasted on things outside of your influence. Now, those high performers stay focused on what they can act on, their effort, their attitude, and decisions, allowing them to remain calm and effective. So how do we break uncertainty down into small actions? Well, big challenges can feel obviously overwhelming, but progress comes from simple steps. By breaking uncertainty down into small, manageable actions, you create then momentum and reduce that stress internally, making it easier to move forward, certainly with more clarity. So what about the use structure thinking frameworks that really help? Well, these frameworks can provide a clear way to think when emotions are really high, certainly when you feel stressed. And those tools like prioritization, scenario planning, or decision fillers can help you stay logical, organized, and focused on what really matters the most. So in terms of use simple techniques like pause, breathe, and reset. Those 2 or 3 seconds can actually make a huge difference. Okay, it really can. So when the pressure rises, your first response really matters. Taking a moment to pause, breathe, and reset helps calm the mind, reduces emotional reactions, and allows you to respond with clarity and control. So ask yourself the question, are you in control? Or is it your Dave? Or Jessica's in the vets? Brilliant.
I was going to bring Dave
Over to you, Craig.
Thank you. I was going to bring Dave up again, actually, and just see. I'm glad we haven't seen much of Dave at the moment. But thank you so much, Mark. There's a really super insightful session coming from years of expertise and experience. But there's a couple of things that I just wanted to recap on. Because actually working with you, pulling this together, there's certain things that I learned through working with this. So one thing I'd love to say thank you. But my key learnings that I'm going to take away from this, and I hope you take away similar ones, is that resilience isn't static or stable. It's something that is developed through discipline and focus, attention. That's really a key thing for me, because it does seem that some people just are more resilient, and they may be, but it is a muscle that we can train and actually put a lot of things behind it. So the one thing I would say is if you are a leader or if you're part of an organization, providing the tools for people to develop that muscle is really, really critical and helps them grow in their resilience. But also resilience grows in environments where that psychological safety is high, but that teamwork, the infectiousness, the contagious piece, that if you're feeling strong in your resilience, you can share that with other people, I think is also a really key one to work through. And teams together can enable collective resilience. I think that's a really powerful one. I keep going back to Elizabeth's message, actually, just in regards to having that connectivity and presence, not just physically. It's really super, super key. And also focus on what you can control. It's a really important message. And what's your sphere or circle of influence and control to make sure that you look at those as well. So with any of our webinars, so if anyone's been to any of our webinars in the past, we like to give you something to take away with, to help you think a little bit deeper and also to pose more questions. And we've designed this performance management white paper specifically for the UAE region. And in these moments, we've talked about resilience, but also we talked about performance. So it's a great time not to take your eye off performance, because if you sustain performance through times of uncertainty, there is proof, there is stats behind there where you can actually accelerate your growth when normality sets back in. You're the first ones to respond quickly. You show those resilience factors, and gaining and sustaining momentum is critical. It's something we've learned through many disruptions that we've seen throughout our work as a consultancy, both within business, but also caused by external factors as well. And as promised, we are coming back to our broadcast list. So if you do want to be part of our broadcast list, please do add Mark on WhatsApp, opt in, and you'll be first to hear of our latest resources, our events, and that does also include some of our VIP invitation only events. So don't miss out on those. Drop Mark a message and he can make sure that you're added to that list itself. But as we mentioned, that is a broadcast list. You'll only get the information. It's not a conversation. So if you prefer a conversation, if your inner Dave is coming out and you want to rage out on a WhatsApp group and share it with like-minded professionals, but also directly through to the LTT team, join our WhatsApp group, and you can then share some important things with other team members all across the world, and have the power of a network and a team of specialist consultants right on your mobile phone. So it's a really great group. We have lots of conversations in there, so please do join that as well. And we will share that afterwards as well. And finally, if you enjoyed this week's webinar, we have a series of live webinars and events coming up. Our next is hosted by the fantastic Debbie Venables, who will be taking a deep dive into team performance and how we architect teams and exceed expectations. So if you want to drill down into how to support your team members, this is a great one to Debbie will be sharing practical strategies that will transform ordinary teams through to extraordinary powerhouses of productivity, innovation and resilience. And that's the 30th of April. It's going to be 9:30. It's actually BST, so British Summer Time, but also 12:30 GST, so Gulf Standard Time as well. So please do join if you can. And with that, I would like to thank Mark for his expertise, his guidance during this webinar, and also I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining today and sharing your questions as well. It's really, really great. We will be sharing some insights across that broadcast channel. Enjoy the rest of your day. Please keep safe, and we look forward to seeing you on one of our upcoming webinars or events very, very soon. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Craig. Take care, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Speak to you all soon. Thank you.
Bye.